Former Conservative leadership hopeful Maxime Bernier has retired his campaign debt. This morning, the runner-up to Andrew Scheer tweeted, "The $275,000 debt from my leadership campaign is at last entirely paid off. A huge thanks to all those who helped me. From now on, all my efforts and all the money I raise will be devoted to fighting for our conservative principles." Do Bernier's plans to continue fundraising and traveling the country to push his ideas pose a problem for Andrew Scheer? Let's ask the Power Panel. Joining me now from west to east in Vancouver, former Conservative Cabinet Minister Stockwell Day; in Regina, Associate Principal with Navigator Sally Hauser; and in Toronto, President of Pomp and Circumstance Amanda Alvaro; and with me in Ottawa, the CBC's poll analyst Eric Grenier. Welcome, everybody. And Eric, I am going to start with you because I want you to put this into context for us. Maxime Bernier has shown a little bit of muscle when it comes to forgiving that leadership debt. But how are the other candidates doing?
Well, he had a lot to pay off. He had about $275,000 in campaign debts to pay off, and that he did. He did have a pretty impressive fundraising. He raised about $135,000 just in the last quarter. By comparison, that was 3 times as much as the Bloc raised and a 1/6 as much as the NDP raised. So clearly, he's able to raise some money even if the race is long over. But he's not the only one with some debts. Kevin O'Leary had about $500,000 in debt. Kelly Leitch had about $100,000. And for the NDP, Guy Caron, he had about $60,000 in debt that he had to pay off. So some candidates still working to pay that money off, but we know that Aaron O'Toole has paid off his debts. He had about $76,000, and Maxime Bernier, who was the one with the second most debt out of all of these people, that's now off the books.
One of the things that's so intriguing about Maxime Bernier's paying back his debt was that he says he saw a real rush of funds after he lost his shadow cabinet or critic portfolio, which, you know, you would think perhaps a demotion wouldn't be the way that would happen, but it seems to have worked out for Mr. Bernier. Let's ask Stockwell Day about this, because it is not just fundraising that might raise a few eyebrows, perhaps cause Andrew Scheer some concern. In an interview with the Canadian Press, Maxime Bernier was critical of the Conservative Party's support of supply management, in fact, of everybody's support of supply management, saying, quote, "We just need to convince the government, and it's sad that I'm the only one, the only elected member of Parliament who's speaking for the 35 million Canadians on that issue. And now the government, they're putting our economy at risk with that position." Stockwell Day, how do you manage something like that in caucus? He's the only one in the entire country speaking up on this point of view.
Well, he says he's the only MP speaking up for it. That could be true. There'd be others who quietly support him, but he could be only one speaking up. He's got to be a bit careful. He's not actually speaking for 35 million people, because a lot of people still support supply management. In terms of what this means coming up, it's an interesting time because you've got the Conservative Convention coming at them pretty soon, and there's a number of resolutions on the floor, or apparently being looked at, that are actually asking for support for supply management. So from a broad tent point of view, I think Andrew Scheer could be saying, look, we allow differentiation of opinion, and we're keeping people in the tent. But the fact that Max Bernier, and full disclosure, I have raised funds for him back when he was an MP and going into his constituency, and very popular there. This for the leader, Andrew Scheer, who's actually getting around the country quite a bit, regardless of not getting much coverage, it's going to be a bit of an issue. His people were telling him, you've got to deal with Max. And I think Andrew is going to take a little more laid back approach, a step back approach, saying Max Bernier is alive and well, and he has a lot of support, and let's try and manage it. So I think it's going to be an interesting time at the convention, especially now that he says he's paid off his debts and he's raising money to continue to advance conservative principles.
Amanda, I'd like to ask you, the Liberal Party has seen certainly its share of people who were not on the same page, some rivalries perhaps. I certainly don't know that we're ready to elevate any of this to like Martin Chrétien territory. We're not there yet, but can you give me the sort of Liberal perspective about how to try to maintain peace?
We're not there yet, but Maxime Bernier has totally gone rogue, and it's like equal parts entertaining and I'm sure concerning for the Conservative Party. But Andrew Scheer has, he's in a bit of a wedge right now, and he's dealing with it on 2 fronts. The first front is that Maxime is seen to be saying exactly what he wants to say, when he wants to say it. He's prepared to go to news media. He's prepared to tell his story in long format. And now he wants to put some dollars behind it as well. So he's talking about my fundraising fundraising efforts aren't over. I'm going to spend the next number of months, the next number of years fundraising to talk about these conservative values, which may or may not be in line with the leader. At the same time, where this becomes a little tricky for the Conservative Party and for Andrew Scheer is the fact that he is a fundraising powerhouse, and he's a fundraising powerhouse in Quebec, an area where the party has traditionally had a harder time raising funds. So while they need to rein him in on one front, they also need to leverage his fundraising ability on the other front. I think for the rest of us, it's just going to be sort of fun to watch how this battle rolls out.
Sally, I want to bring you in. Would you have any particular advice for Andrew Scheer right now? I realize that's not really what you're in the business of doing. But, you know, the NDP, too, has certainly seen some leadership challenges, can we say? I'm thinking of some of the moments that Tom Mulcair experienced, not only losing his gig, but then this attempt to oust him before he was done the interim period. Any advice about trying to maintain party harmony when there are differences of opinion?
Well, I'm with Amanda here. I love the Maxime Bernier show. I find it very entertaining. You know, you always have to think about caucus discipline and party discipline. And we saw Maxime Bernier being, you know, relieved of his critical role for talking about promoting his book, talking about supply management. And I think it's interesting here, and it's also dangerous. You know, they call him Mad Max, but he seems you know, crazy like a fox in many, many ways. You know, he's paid off his debt, which was very impressive. It was a large debt. Mm-hmm. So what he's demonstrating by being able to raise this amount of money after he lost the leadership race and going forward is that he very much has a constituency within the Conservative Party, you know, and across Canada. You know, we're only about just over a year away from the next federal election, and he's got to be thinking, well, if the Conservatives don't win, how long is Andrew Scheer going to be there?
Exactly.
And so I wonder where that kind of fundraising, where that kind of thinking of fundraising and promoting those conservative values is really going to go eventually.
Stockwell, I would like to bring you back in. You know, you do see some other Conservatives in that Canadian Press piece. I believe it was James Bazan who was basically saying, this is certainly not a quote, but like, could you stop it, please, Maxime? I wonder, though, is there any way for this to be an advantage for Andrew Scheer, that you've got Maxime Bernier speaking for this sort of libertarian? Jordan Peterson is an individual he's associated himself with, this sort of tranche of Conservatives, or is this just dicey territory?
I hadn't heard Jordan Peterson's views on farm
supply management.
But
I'm unaware myself.
you know, I mean, the main difference here, you're talking about conservatives, small c conservatives, focus on individual freedoms, individual rights more than the other two parties. So the other two parties can think more collectively when it comes to times like this, and other than, well, somebody already mentioned the Martin Chrétien fiasco, really. The other parties generally will think more collectively, whereas you have to allow, in a Conservative Party, you've got to allow for a little more expression. Otherwise, people are going to think you're coming down on one of the main tenets of conservatism, which is to allow for individual expression. So I think if Andrew can show himself that, you know, he's allowing for diversity of opinion, he's got to be careful just before the convention to be coming out and saying there's no way, shape, and form we're going to let the debate continue on supply management. President Trump has sort of raised the stakes on this a bit because Canadians are thinking, well, maybe if we didn't, or some Canadians thinking, maybe if we didn't have this strident farm supply managed business, maybe we would be doing better economically because we wouldn't be facing these other tariffs. So there are a lot of moving parts here. Andrew's job, and he's been doing it quite well, is to keep the whole machine moving while all these other dynamics are at place. But there's positive energy there. And I think Max Bernier is going to, you know, measure it carefully. We just heard the comment about will he be waiting in the wings if, you know, the first string goalie has a bad time in the election shootout. That's always a possibility. So it's manageable, it's not bad energy, and he's just got to try and contain it.
Okay, I want to bring Eric in here quickly just because he has a little bit more news for us, a little bit more information about what Kevin O'Leary has been up to and his plans to try to pay back his, I believe it's $400,000 in debt now?
Yeah, that's what he has about remaining. He's paid off about $135,000, he said. But he says he's going to fund a legal challenge of the elections law in Canada that prevents you from using your own money to pay off debts. He was referencing the experience of Pierre-Carl Péladeau in Quebec. He did the same thing. He recently pled guilty to breaking electoral law by using his own money to pay off some debts. Kevin O'Leary would like to do the same thing, but he said he's going to fund a legal challenge of that. So we'll see where that goes, because he raised about as much money throughout his time to try to pay off his debt as Maxime Bernier did in a few months. He says he needed to be able to match those donations in order to get money from people. Bernier showed that if you have something to offer, if you have a position that people believe in, you can raise some money. Kevin O'Leary seems to be making the case that you need to have money to raise money, and he wants to use his own. We'll see where that goes.
It's also hard to raise money when you've quit the leadership race before it was over. Thank you so much.